What's up, everybody? Derek here with the Bass Factory. Today we're going to be talking about the top 5 baits that I use on those windy days. Whenever you're fishing those windy days, you may think your day is shot and that there's just a little bit too much wind for your liking. Well, the issue may be that you might not be using the right bait and you may not be in the right area. Those windy days can be awesome days because what happens is those bait fish are being followed by those bass usually. And on those windy days, it usually can also create an overcast day, which fish get into ambush mode. And when that wind and that current gets generated, then those fish really get active and they get positioned into certain areas. And my go-to, first of all, is a spinnerbait. This is one that I've had for a really long time. This is a Booyah 3/8 ounce. These things can be killer. These things are, if you ask any fisherman that fishes, they will fish a spinnerbait, not just on those windy days, because you'll see a lot of fishermen beating the bank with these, but they will definitely be throwing these on windy days, and these can be killer. They will catch so many fish for you. But with this being a 3/8 ounce, let's say you're trying to get down a little bit deeper and you're trying to catch those fish that may be hanging just off those breaks, like on those points that I had mentioned. This is a 1 ounce spinnerbait, and this thing can get down to those depths, and you can be pulling this through there, and it basically just simulates or emulates a bait fish. So as it's coming by, those spinners are actually flashing in the water and creating turbulence, and those fish will hammer these, and especially if they're back in those pockets to where they're on trees and other stuff and they're just hanging in ambush mode. They might be grass in those pockets. They'll be waiting for it, and you pull one of these by one of those, or just barely tick a brush pile or just a tree that's hanging up shallow, and you just pull it up through it and just flash those blades, or just give it a cadence or a pause or a stop. This thing will catch a lot of fish for you. My number 2 would be a chatterbait. This has really become one of my most effective ways of fishing. Not just in the wind, because it doesn't produce the flash that a spinnerbait will, but it causes that vibration as well. So whenever you get into those muddy water or those a little bit more stained water situations, this is the one that I really turn to. And especially if you've got a lot of grass, you could be pulling this thing up in those pockets where that wind's blowing into and rip this thing free, and it won't hang up like a spinnerbait will. But a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take a swim bait and I'll tie it onto the back or some kind of trailer to put it onto the back to increase the profile of this thing. So I'll be pulling this thing through and it looks a lot bigger. And if you've got a swim bait on here, that added turbulence of that swim bait, that boot style or whatnot on the backside, vibrating in the water, causing that turbulence, will really bring some fish in. So this is another one that's definitely great. Okay, this is one that everybody knows about as well. This is a square bill. Square bills are awesome, especially whenever those fish are in rocky situations where they're in the backs of pockets. And especially on points, if you're pulling it down a point and those fish are just like I was mentioning, where they're hanging off in ambush mode, waiting for those bait fish to come by, especially in fall when those fish are moving up, or in spring where they're looking for areas to be making beds. Those fish will be up shallower, and there may be rocks down in there that they may be ambush mode behind, and that current that's coming through there, they'll be waiting for some bait fish. And if you take this thing and you dig it down into the bottom and you dig it all around, those fish will be finding this thing, and it drives them nuts whenever it's digging into the bottom, just grinding into that bottom, and those fish will come up and hammer a square bill. So this is another one you definitely want to give a shot at. This swim bait, you can either go with, I've had this one for a while and I've caught some good fish on this one. I forget what brand it is, but any kind of boot style swim bait like this is great. This is, I think this is like a 6-inch, 5 or 6 inch, but this one will definitely catch some fish. This is a good one. It runs through that water. The only problem is its hang-ups in the grass. So if you're fishing grassy situations, this will hang up a lot more than I like. But if you're fishing out deeper and you're trying to find those fish that may be hanging just off those breaks, this is a great imitation of a larger bait fish. But this is usually the style that I go with. This is a zoom. just swim bait that I've got here, but usually I go with like a Reaction Innovation skinny dipper or something of that style. But what I'll do with this is I'll actually take like a 4 or 5 wide gap hook and I'll run it through here, and I can make this thing weedless. A lot of the time what I'll do is I'll actually take a bullet weight and I'll put it up above it, but sometimes I'll use just a swim bait tied onto this thing, and this thing can be killer. In grassy situations where you're just ripping it through the grass, or you're just running it along the bottom, this thing will catch you a lot of fish just alone with it, because it's very subtle with the turbulence that it causes with that swim bait tail. But it doesn't really create flash, but in clear water, this thing can be great for you, and this is definitely a great one to give a shot. There's been situations where I've fished in the wind and I've killed them on them. I've caught so many fish on this in the wind, and this is a Carolina rig. I've got a this is actually a Yum Dinger. I like them because they've got a huge profile and they're cheaper than a Senko. I love Senkos, but this Yum Dinger for this situation works really good. This one, I like a Yum Dinger, but I will, during the summertime, switch to a larger worm. And these worms, well, this is a ribbon tail. These things will actually catch you some good fish. I love these things, but mainly in the summertime because they have such a large profile and those fish get really hungry and they like bigger baits in the summer. But this Carolina rig's really easy. It's just got that bullet weight up top. It's got 2 little beads that I get from a craft section, really cheap at Walmart. And then it's got a swivel right there, and then I tie on a liter of fluorocarbon, because usually above that I'll have some braid tied on. But this thing, the reason a Senko works, I'll take this thing and go across a point, and I'll work that point and I'll be pulling it off onto the deep end, especially if I know that the wind's coming at me, it's coming towards me. Those fish will be hanging just off that drop off in ambush mode on the backside, waiting for those fish to be coming across, because it's almost just like a current break. And what I'll do is, since I'm tossing it up shallow and pulling across the point, I'll find where those fish are located really. And the great thing about this is it'll dart in the water when you're pulling it along. And this thing has caught me some great fish. And all of these lures have caught me some great fish, and especially in the wind. So if you're fishing in the wind and you're trying to find those fish, you may be fishing dead areas where you think you're out of the wind, where you think you're protected from the wind, and you want to get out of it, but then you don't realize that those fish move to where the wind is at so they can be in ambush mode, because they're ready to eat. They're active. They're really wanting to eat, and they're not really looking in those spots where that wind's not really blowing. Subscribe if you haven't already. Like this video if you liked it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.